Even with the season just a couple months away, the Louisville men's basketball program has a new addition to the team this upcoming season. We will talk about what Fabio Basili brings to the Cardinals program on today's episode of the Locked On the Louisville podcast. Stay tuned.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome into another episode of the Locked On the Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. I serve as a credential media member for Cardinal Sports Zone. I also do some PA announcing work for the university in various sports. I want to take this time to thank you, as I always do, for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, the Locked On the Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services 5 days a week, your team every day. The Louisville men's basketball program has added another player to the team this season. That is three-star point guard Fabio Basili. We will discuss why the fan base essentially is very divided on this recruitment. We will also analyze what the expectations should be for Basili in year one in his college career. And then finally, we will take a little bit of a step back and talk about the possible rotation options that the Cardinals can go with for the 2022-23 campaign. So let's get right on into it. I will say this to start out with. I would assume it's Fabio Basili. I don't think it's like a Basili or anything like that. But I think that's how I've heard it pronounced. If I'm incorrect, please forgive my ignorance, but I believe I heard it was pronounced Basili. So overall, this is a very intriguing recruitment for the Cardinals. Basili was a name that was kind of thrown into the mix early on in the summer. He made a surprising official visit to the program in June. Was originally a 2022 prospect, reclassified back into the class of 2023, and seemingly one would believe that maybe the delay in the official announcement was Basili trying to reclassify back into the 2022 recruiting cycle, I guess squaring everything away academically and making sure he has all of those benchmarks checked off that you have to have, in terms of requirements for, certain high school districts and, collegiate requirements and things of that nature. I know that I think every state and every school district is different in that regard. But the news is official. It broke late on Wednesday evening. Joe Tipton of On3, the On3 recruiting service, put out there that Basili would be joining the team. And kind of reading through the tea leaves over the past week, it seemed like it was just a matter of when and not if Basili would join the program for the upcoming season. It has sparked a lot of debate, as it has since Basili has been mentioned in the picture, is that there are a lot of people that disagree on, the projected role and upside of Basili. There's essentially two schools of thought. There is one portion of the fan base that believes that Basili is very, very underrated. One of the possible steals of the 2022 class, overlooked by a lot of recruiting services, but the film shows something that maybe the rankings don't necessarily reflect. He looks solid on film. He's, over 6'3". I think he's in the 6'5" range, but basically, the takeaway is that there's a good portion of the fan base that believes that he is a major sleeper and is going to be a very big factor for this team, maybe not only in the future, but in the immediate present for the upcoming season. And then there's the other portion of the fan base on the total opposite end of the spectrum that basically saying, hey, look, this is Louisville basketball we're talking about. We were convinced that Kenny Payne was going to be reeling in 5 stars immediately. once he came into the program, and that hasn't been the case. So our frustrations are boiling over a little bit, and we only have 9 scholarship players, and we haven't really made a ton of big time additions that would maybe lead some to believe that Louisville's going to be significantly better next season. And besides, Fabio Basili is a 3-star prospect that doesn't have a ton of high major D1 interest, let alone offers. Has offers from SMU and I think it's Kansas State. SMU, TCU, and Kansas State, I do believe. But there's the other portion of the fan base that just isn't buying it yet. They're thinking, okay, not every prospect can be a diamond in the rough. We heard that a lot in the Chris Mack era. So there's a good portion of the fan base that is very skeptical about this. And it's not necessarily toward Basili in a personal way or anything like that. It's just hearing the idea that a 3-star prospect that isn't even ranked, in the 24/7 sports composite, doesn't have a lot of high Division I offers or even interest, is supposed to come in right away and be a major impact for next year's team. So I think that both sides of the table bring some solid arguments to the discussion. I don't think that I agree with either entirely. I think that there are some good points that are made from each side. Essentially, before I get into my opinion on the matter, let me read to you. I do want to read to you what Basili's high school coach said. Let's see. Steve Reese, the coach of Oak Ridge, called Basili a perfect fit at Louisville with head coach Kenny Payne. This is an article that Jody Demling of Cardinal Authority 24/7 Sports Louisville site released just yesterday. He said, for sure he's going to be able to help Louisville. It wasn't always about Fabio, but he's a really talented kid, and he can make the other people around him better. He's super talented. He's a dynamic player and a dynamic person. With Coach Payne and his staff coaching him, it's a perfect fit for Fabio. He's a kid that is going to be great with Coach Payne. He and Mike James played together, and they were fun to watch. He led us to 3 Final Fours. Fabio has always been one of the keys that made everyone better. Last year, we had a younger team, and it was more about Fabio, so he had to do more and averaged more. For reference, this past season, he averaged 20.1 points per game, 4.8 assists, and 4.1 rebounds per contest in his career at this is past year. He scored 864 points for his career at Oak Ridge. As I mentioned, a teammate of current Louisville redshirt freshman Mike James. So there's a lot of chemistry there. They've been very, very successful at the high school level. Put it this way, I think that, in my opinion, this is a pretty intriguing recruitment here for Louisville. This is a solid addition, in my opinion. I think that Basili's film does lead you to believe that he might be slept on pretty significantly by recruiting services. A player that really hasn't gotten a love from recruiting services. I don't know. I think that he played AAU this year, but it seems like maybe I'd heard along the way somewhere that he maybe didn't play AAU in one summer. I could be completely wrong and completely misguided in that, but it feels like I've heard that. If that's not true, then just disregard that. But that would be maybe a possible reason. Basili seems like he's grown a decent amount. It seems like no one really has a true measurement, but a lot of people believe that he's in the 6'5" range, which is pretty solid. Judging by his film, I think that Basili is a true point general. Affects the game in a lot of different ways. Reminds me a lot of male basketball, where Caleb Glenn, current Louisville commit, used to play before transferring to La Lumiere. If you are from the area, you know that male has been very, very good under Coach Tim Hayworth. In 2020, they were the unanimous #1 team in the state before COVID hit right before the state tournament. That team had a lot of D1 talent. Obviously, Caleb Glenn was spectacular. Tyron Moore, who is now playing his Division I college basketball. I think it's at Georgia State or Georgia Southern, one of the two. Howard Fleming played at Illinois State last year. There's a lot of talent on that team, and rightfully so. They're very, very good. But Jake Evans, who kind of got overlooked a bit, wasn't the flashiest player, is actually at Northern Kentucky now playing a solid role, but kind of got overlooked a little bit because he wasn't the flashiest player, but he made the team better in all aspects. When he was on the floor leading the offense and really leading the defense as well, it was clear that Male was a better team with him on the court. Some of his impact really just doesn't show in the box score. That kind of is what this reminds me of in terms of situations, is that I think that Basili is one of those players, and that's that, his impact, he might not be the flashiest player. He might not be able to jump the highest, or he might not be the quickest player or the strongest player or the most explosive athlete or anything of that nature, but he's very solid. When you watch his film, it's clear that he has a very, very effective feel for the game, can see the plays develop and things happen on the court before it actually happens. He has solid vision. With that size, I think that he does a good job of handling the basketball, shooting over, I think, 50% from the field, 40% from behind the arc. So he's very efficient, a guy that, maybe not necessarily known as a scorer in his high school career until his last year, really rose into that role and excelled. So I think that Basili is a player that has a lot of potential to roll with, and it's probably a very, very solid addition. I think that he could definitely be a player that is going to be very successful here at Louisville. But I do understand some of the skepticism, because not every diamond in the rough player or diamond in the rough recruit ends up panning out, and sometimes the ranking is justified by a player not panning out. And there's a lot of instances where guys don't pan out. And that's just the harsh reality of it. Louisville is a situation to where, you're expected to recruit well, but Kenny Payne hasn't been on the job but maybe 6 months. So it's kind of hard to maybe expect him to come in right away and recruit at this very, very high level right off the bat when it's about relationships and stuff like that. So it's way too early. The verdict is still out in terms of recruiting, and he's making a lot of solid relationships in the 2023 class. So overall, I like the addition. I understand the hesitancy, but I want to now transition into talking about what should be the expectation for Fabio Basili, especially in year one. We'll do that here in just a second after a message from our friends over at the NHTSA. Look, imagine this. You're hanging out with some friends and putting back a few drinks. A few becomes a few too many. As the evening comes to an end and people start to head out, you think of calling for a ride. Nah, you live nearby. You can make it home okay. It's no big deal. Maybe you've done it before. What are the odds that you'll get pulled over anyway? And even so, what's the worst that could happen? Your insurance goes up. You lose your license, you lose your job, your car, you kill someone. Everyone knows about the risks of driving drunk. The results are tragic and often deadly. However, that still doesn't stop everyone from getting behind the wheel while under the influence. That's why police officers are out there right now looking for impaired drivers on our roads to save lives. So if you think you're okay to drive after a few drinks, think again. Play it safe and plan ahead to get a ride. It only takes one mistake to change your life or someone else's life forever. Drive sober or get pulled over. It's just not worth it at the end of the day. It might be inconvenient to call for a ride or even wait till you sober up, but too many lives have been taken. Too many lives have been changed. So heading into the second segment, discussing Fabio Basili's expectations in year one here within the Louisville program. I will start out by saying that I don't think that we should put high expectations on Basili in year one. Because personally, I don't think it's truly fair. We have to get out of this headspace that, there's a cliche kind of fallback excuse when people talk about diamonds in the rough is, Russ Smith was a 2-star. Gorgie Zhang was a lower ranked player. For every Russ Smith, there are an X amount of players that just don't pan out. Gorgui Dieng was a guy that really rose up recruiting, his senior year, and Rick Pitino really jumped on this recruitment before he was able to blow up anymore. And Gorgui Dieng's a little bit of a different situation where he kind of rose up the rankings toward the end of his senior year. Not every player turns into a Russ Smith or a Gorgui Dieng. I mean, we're talking about two of the program's all-time greats here. For every Russ Smith, there are 10 to 15 guys that just don't pan out, and that's okay because it happens. I'm not saying Fabio Basili is going to pan out. I'm not saying that he's not going to pan out. I'm not saying one way or the other. I'm just saying we have to get out of this headspace of calling every recruit that's not ranked high a Russ Smith type prospect or a Gorgui Dieng type prospect, when in reality, those are outlier type of players that beat the odds and do the unthinkable. Another thing is that we have to be patient. I mean, he is a guy that's being added to the program here in the end of August. The season starts the middle of November, so there's not a lot of time. He didn't get the same luxury of having months to work with the new coaching staff, so it might take him a little time to get acclimated with his teammates on the court and with what Kenny Payne and them want to do, maybe with his body and the strength and conditioning program and things of that nature. But we have to tamper the expectations year one because, well, personally, I don't think it's fair to put those high of expectations on him in year one, because what if he struggles right away, which he might? Then there's going to be a good portion of the fan base that says, oh, see, we told you, he's not that good. He's not good enough. And then maybe he's not even playing bad. He's just not making a huge significant role, or he's not, let me say, a huge significant impact, right? So maybe he's not even playing bad, but the expectations are so high to where it's not meeting those expectations that are kind of unrealistic. And you talk about Russ Smith and Gorgui Dieng, both of those guys struggled in their freshman year. Sometimes it takes guys a couple seasons to really, really, come into their own and develop. And I think that Basili is a player that by maybe next season or the year after that, he's going to be very solid. I do believe in his development, for the record. I think that he has good size for a point guard. He sees the court well. He shoots the ball well from deep. He doesn't try to do too much on offense. He's a very efficient scorer and a very solid defender as well. So I think that there's a lot of things to like about Fabio Basili's game. But put it into perspective, like Kamari Lands and Devin Reed. Both of these players are ranked significantly higher than Fabio Basili. And maybe we expect Lands to be, pretty solid because there's rumors that he might be the starting two guard in a way that, he's been very, very solid in practice. But I don't think a lot of people are coming into this season thinking he's going to average 15 points a game. Devin Reed, it seems like the good amount of Louisville fans, the vast majority believes that, if he does have a solid role this year, it's going to be maybe in a situational role, kind of as a shooter off the bench, situations to where, you're trying to stretch the floor and be able to utilize the three-point shooting that he's very, very good at. But a lot of people realize that, he's probably a project as well that's going to take a couple years. Some of these players, come in and they take a couple years, and that's okay because Kenny Payne, Nolan Smith, Danny Manning, these guys are known for their ability to develop players, and that's what it's all about. And that's what Louisville basketball has been, even in the prime time in which Louisville was really, really good in the late 2010 or early 2010s, late 2000s. Guys developed. It took some time for players to really, really make significant impacts. So the last thing I think that Louisville fans should do is place too high and unrealistic expectations on Fabio Basili, because it may take some time for him to develop and to get acclimated to the college game. I think realistically speaking, the rotation should look like maybe 7 to 10 minutes of good, solid action to where he alleviates some of the ball handling responsibilities that Ellis has and gives him a little breather on the bench. Some solid minutes to where it's, maybe a solid assist to turnover ratio, kind of like a Quentin Snyder in year one as a Cardinal. If you remember, Snyder, not a huge scoring priority year one, but made some good plays when he played. So, like I said, realistically speaking, expectations should be anywhere from like 7 to 12 minutes, solid work off the bench, low turnover numbers, and a guy that maybe averages 5 points a game or something like that. Somewhere in that range. So I think he's going to be a good player. but I think it might take some time for him to get to that point in his career. So with that being said, let's take a look at what the rotation could look like for the Louisville Cardinals next season. We will do that here in just a second after we talk about our friends over at BetOnline. BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all of your betting needs. Find all of your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. Find reviews and news of every league, including MLB, NFL, NBA, NHL, and more. It continues to be the top online resource for all of your sports wagering information, from live in-game betting, scores, and podcasts. They have you covered. Head to BetOnline today or use your mobile device to learn more about the action happening. BetOnline, where the game starts. So heading into the final segment, discussing what the rotation could look like for the Louisville Cardinals this upcoming season. Starting out with the starters, redundancy at its finest. Starting out with the starters, L. Ellis obviously is going to be your starting one guard. Sidney Curry going to get a lot of time in the front court along with Brandon Huntley-Hatfield and Jae'Lyn Withers. Seems like a lot of people believe that Kamari Lands will be the starting two guards. So let's assume that that's the core foundation of the rotation. That's your starting five. L. Ellis and Sidney Curry are guys that are really predicted to have big jumps in their respective roles this season. Possible #1 scoring options. Jae'Lyn Withers is looking to get back on track. Brandon Huntley-Hatfield probably going to make that next step in his development as well. And Kamari Lands is a freshman that, you're looking for some solid minutes right away. The question is, even with the with 10 scholarship players now, what does that rotation look like? Because a solid rotation, you're looking probably about 8 to 9 players. 10 might be pushing it a little bit too much. So, the 5 other scholarship players are looking to really prove themselves. And then you have Hersey Miller as well, the walk-on who from I believe it's Tennessee State that could also maybe be in line for some minutes in the back end of the rotation. Guard play wise, it leads me to believe that Fabio Basili is going to see some decent minutes, especially if he responds well to live in-game action and does well and doesn't turn the ball over and maybe is able to run the offense pretty solidly. And that leads me to believe that he may be a piece that you can plug in right away and get you some solid minutes in that second unit. So I think Fabio Basili is going to be a guy that they're going to rely upon a lot to play some solid minutes. Devin Ree, like I said, kind of a situational role, can handle the basketball, as a 2 or 3, but mainly kind of revered as a shooter. So I think that this, rotationally speaking, is going to be a player that we see in certain aspects to maybe where we need some perimeter shooting and things of that nature. I think Mike James is going to play a big-time role. I think that Mike James, yes, he is coming off of a serious injury, one of the most serious that you can have in that Achilles tear. He got cleared, but even then, sometimes it takes players some time to get back to their, their pre-injury physique and things of that nature and their fitness levels. But Mike James is a player that I think, defensively speaking, he's going to be a guy that they're going to be able to play him right away. Also offensively, a guy that hearing before the season last year was really tearing it up in practice. So you would think that Mike James, Devin Ree are probably going to play some significant roles. I think Mike James could end up being maybe like a 6th man off the bench. And then Devin Ree in a situational role, and then Fabio Basili in a backup point guard role. I know that Kenny Payne likes to utilize size, so you're maybe taking traditional small forwards in an era of positionless basketball and playing them more in a role to where they're handling the ball just a tad bit more. But I do think that Louisville needs guys that can create for others on the court as well. The good thing is that Brandon Huntley-Hatfield and Sidney Curry have shown that they can do that from the high post down on the block and things of that nature, and having shooters like Fabio Basili and Devin Ree are definitely luxuries to have. Then you have 2 guys in the front court, J.J. Traynor and Roosevelt Wheeler. Trainer was a guy that last year didn't necessarily play a lot, but in his freshman season had some big-time moments. Roosevelt Wheeler had some moments where he was solid as well. I'm interested to see an off-season with Danny Manning and Kenny Payne, another year in the strength and conditioning program, what that looks like. So the starting five, I think maybe you switch out maybe Mike James for Kamari Lands at the 2 guard, but I think 4/5 of the starting five is pretty solidified. It's going to be about who is able to rise up into that into the next spots. Is Kenny Payne going to go with a 8-man rotation? Is he going to play all 10? Who is going to be the odd one left out? That is the question that needs to be answered, or questions that need to be answered, I should say. But overall, I think I think it's a solid addition. I think Fabio Basili addresses maybe the lack of guard depth at the true point guard position. I know in positionless basketball, multiple players can handle the ball, but not all players can create offense and lead offense for others. And I think Fabio Basili really checks off those boxes. So it is an intriguing addition to the program. I think that we need to maybe relax on the high expectations year one. No disrespect to him. I just think it might be a little unfair to expect such a high thing when we aren't even expecting that much from our higher rated 2022 additions. So, but I think he's going to have a solid career. It might take him a little bit of time, but a solid addition nonetheless. Before we get out of here, I want to give a shout out to Locked On ACC. Be sure to check out that podcast on all streaming services. Thanks again for making Locked On Louisville your first listen every day. The Ultimate College Football Preview is here, a 7-episode preview with college experts, local team experts, and Odyssey college football insiders. It's everything you need to be ready for the college football season in one spot. Search for Ultimate College Football Preview on your Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. But that is going to wrap up this Thursday edition of the show. Everyone have a great day. We will see you right back here tomorrow.